So how do we update the 350Z cubby and head unit so it looks more like this, with a larger 9-inch screen placed higher in the console? Let me show you.
Being 20 years old now, this thing originally came with a CD player and a tape deck, which meant having the stereo low on the center console didn't matter because you would never look at it. It was just down there out the way. But in a more modern world, we like to run maps and things on there. And we have Spotify screens and, you know, reversing cameras and all that kind of stuff. So to have it so low in the center console means that it is difficult to keep your eye on that, especially for maps and on the road at the same time. So I think it's time I fixed it. Obviously, my center console here is missing at the moment, but this is what it typically looks like. There's the big cubby at the top, which in some versions of the 350Z has a sat-nav in it. And below that, I have my doubled-in stereo, which is a Kenwood DMX 125 DAB, 6.8-inch doubled-in, and it's been great, but it's only ever had to basically play Spotify. That's all it's ever done. I want to put my maps on there and not have to take my eyes completely all the way down here off the road. I don't want them to be on my phone anymore. I want it to have integrated music with Spotify and whatnot. I want to have the reversing camera in there, and I want to be able to put on my own apps which control things like the underglow, which is what these additional power wires are, and have all of that and whatever other controllable stuff I do be usable through this head unit. But the big thing I'm going to do is relocate its position up to here. And we've gone for a big 9-inch screen, which we're going to integrate into all of this space that we've got that is usually where the cubby is. This presents a few distinct challenges. One, I'm going to have to figure out a way of Frankensteining the existing front fascia so that the new head unit can be moved upwards into its new spot and still look OEM. And then I'm going to have to consider how we fill the space that was left behind where the head unit currently is, which will probably end up being all the controls and things that I have for my existing underglow and whatnot. Fortunately, this is a big bit of space, and I think we've got a lot of opportunity to put something in there without it being too bad, so long as we can make custom brackets that hold it in place, either attached to this plastic surround or attached to the front of the fascia plate itself. Which way it ends up being really depends on the fitment of the new stereo. So let's go take a look at that and the fascia plate and decide exactly how we're going to make all this work. To give you an idea of the changing sense of scale, this is the existing Kenwood that's just has come out of the car, 6.8-inch screen. This is the new one that's going in. It is super thin. I mean, this is a thin head unit. This thing is even thinner. There's nothing to it. It weighs a lot less, despite the fact it is so much bigger. So this would never fit, regardless, in this front faceplate. This is how big it is. Like it's nowhere near. But with a bit of work, it will fit in here. So I'm going to have to cut away some of this faceplate, make a custom mounting bracket for the back to hold it all in place, and then smooth it onto the front of the plate somehow. It's probably going to be a combination of 3D printing and then some form of filler, whether that's foam or Bondo or whatever kind of filler it is. But this needs to be sunken in a bit more here. But before I start wildly cutting into this, I need to figure out exactly where the placement of this is going to be, to make sure that the angle's good and there's no reflections from the windscreen or whatever. So we'll go take all of this, take it into the car and figure out exactly where it needs to go. And with all this removed, we can just check the space that we've got. My concern was that this lip on the side was going to need a lot of space for the vent, but it really doesn't. So long as I'm basically majority inside this outside edge on both sides, we should be good. But where exactly is this going to sit? So it's going to be kind of this height. The question is, do I want to do it like flush to the panel and have it that, you know, it sits kind of like completely in, but at more of an angle like this, or do I want to have it kind of like straighter up, which will require more work, like building off of this? So you could go either way. You could do it like that, and then we would have to build all this up custom around the sides here, or we could do it like this, and it will look a bit more OEM. The disadvantage I'm immediately seeing there is at that angle, I get a reflection of from out the window onto the screen, which might make it a little bit more difficult to see. But if I drop it to the bottom, that basically all goes away. And even with the slightest bit of angle here, it's good. So I think it might want to be like raised out ever so slightly at the top. Bear in mind, it's not going to sit this far out. This is all going to be recessed. So I'd say, yeah, maybe there, at like that kind of angle. So what I want to do is just mark this position, so I know where I'm going. I'm just going to use a little bit of masking tape. So I want the bottom there. And really, that's the only marker I need, because the one on the other side will just be measured to the same point, and the rest, obviously, I can do whilst I'm inside the house. So yeah, I just need that one point. Just let me know where the bottom is going to be. I think that would be good. I think that angle works. So what it's going to be a case of doing is tracing this outside edge here, then cutting off the fascia, and then again just testing it with the recess and just making sure it all fits okay. And then we're going to start fabricating all of the custom mounting for this. So here's our bottom edge. We're going to have to make a template of this, pop it over where it's going to go, and then remove all of this edge with a Dremel tool. Yeah, so it turns out I actually didn't need to do this bit here, and I could have done it after I've done the 3D printing bit later, but I'm going to leave this bit of the video in so that you can see the process that I went through figuring that out on both sides, and then put this in place and figure out exactly where my mounting brackets all need to go. Make it in CAD, in Fusion, and then 3D print basically a surround that this can sit straight snug into. Then this bottom bit will be a lot easier. We're just going to remove this surround plate that was from around my double din and make a new thing that sits here, which has buttons and things in for different things. At the moment it's going to be probably for my underglow, but this is very subject to change with some upcoming projects. So I want to make sure this is all removable and changeable so I can put different things in here as I change what this section is going to do. So let's make a template of this front face. Fortunately, it is completely flat, so I can put it face down on some cardboard, trace it around the edge, and that will be my base template. And then I can transfer this into CAD afterwards. But tonight, the main job is to cut these bits and try and get this lined up so I can decide how I want to have it sitting, basically. As I said, because the front of this stereo is completely flat, we can literally just trace around the outside edge of it in order to get a template. Then I can go around and mark the points where the little holes are, where the mounting screws are going to go, and join up all of those lines in order to get positions for where the screws will be. I actually did 2 copies of this template, one to scan and then one to outline and figure out where to remove with the Dremel. Like I say, this bit wasn't actually necessary, but here it is anyway. Because of the kind of moulded plastic this front fascia plate is, cutting it with a Dremel is really easy. I opted to just use a 38mm cutting bit, and then to smooth things off and just do some general roundening, just using a normal sanding bit.
rather than lots of tedious measuring, just scanning the outline that I drew is really the easiest way of getting this template onto a computer, which then you can use in a CAD program. Like I like to use Fusion 360 because it gives me good control of the minutiae. It's really the easiest way of doing this. Then it's just a case of outlining all of the templates that I've made, making little adjustments here and there so that all of the lines match up. And that's it. I've got a very basic template which has been created from the real model. From here, I can then start adding the changes that I need to account for tolerances and actually giving the thing real depth. But the head unit has a bunch of recesses and dips and things in it, so I want to make sure that all of those things are accounted for. I'm not going to go into real huge depth of the process here, but as you can see, I'm just spending the time getting all of the holes in line and giving it a little bit of a fillet around the edges before taking it into Cura, slicing it up for my Ender 3 Pro Max, and printing it in ABS so that it doesn't have any problems with heat in the car. I didn't expect it to fit first time. It usually doesn't and needs a little bit of a micro adjustment, but this one straight out the box was perfect. All the screws lined up and there was a nice 2mm gap all the way around the outside edge, which would account for the thickness of the material that I was going to use. I said earlier that I actually didn't need to do the dremeling at the time when I did it. This is when I did need to do it. So I really ended up doing it twice where I could have just done it this once. And with the bonus bits removed, that cage fit beautifully into the new space. So it was time to just test it in the car. First, we just wanted to put the fascia plate back in and then start testing where this thing's going to sit and just make sure that it doesn't hit anything, which in this case it did. It's just clipping the lower corners of the vents. So I needed to remove a bit of material, which I did with the Dremel, just to give it a little bit of extra space to get around those vents. With that done, it's actually all perfect. And I was just able to adjust it in its hole to get the angle that I liked, and so that the bottom edge was completely flush and the top edge slightly protruded, which gave it a nice angle in the dash. So fiberglassing for beginners. It's actually really simple. You take this fiberglass material, cut it to the shape you want, mix up the resin in the correct quantities. This one is 100 to 3. And then you put the resin where you want to stick the fiberglass in a nice thick coat. You place the fiberglass where you want it, and then you give it another coat of resin on top. Again, nice and thick so that you can see that it's soaked all the way through the fiberglass. And you're going to want to repeat this process 2 or 3 times. Personally, I like to do 3 coats of fiberglass because I know it gives me a really hard adhesion that's not going to break. And in this case, it's just going to hold that fascia plate in place and ensure that it doesn't move. Whilst I'm doing these first couple of layers, I am being really careful not to actually shift the plate. But yeah, we're just going back and forth over the top and the bottom, applying multiple layers. And like I say, in this case, I opted to do 3. After it was finished, it looked like this. And then after letting it dry for about 2 hours, we had this that is really solid. You can feel and hear that it's solid. It's not moving anywhere and it feels really strong. It's a great base to then install the stereo and check that everything all fits nice, which it does. The bondoing part of this process is by far the hardest and the most time-consuming and probably the most artistic part of what we're going to do, because you're going to have to figure out how to transition from the plate to the original fascia. I'm mixing up some body filler. I decided to use this Big Boy Ultra Fine. I would have liked to have used their version with fiberglass in it, but I don't have any, and I have some of this, so it'll make do. And what we're going to do is do multiple passes And the first few were really just figuring out how to fill in all the holes and do some very basic kind of shaping to figure out exactly how this transition is going to work. I'll be honest, at the point where I started, I didn't quite know what the final result was going to look like. It was really just a case of adding more and more filler where I wanted it, and then figuring out as I was going exactly what that was going to look like. The thing is, you don't need to be perfect because you can just sand this stuff away really easily. And that's what this entire process is really about. It's about building up a layer, letting it dry, sanding it, and then building it up more, letting that dry, sanding it, and rinsing and repeating until you have the final shape that you want. For me, it actually took 5 passes of sanding and filling in order to get it done, and it took me basically a whole day. Even though I show the sanding here done by hand, it was taking way too long, so for the majority I used a mouse sander, but that's not recorded because it made so much mess. Please do that outside or do it in a well-ventilated space so that you don't fill your entire house with dust. So yeah, I took multiple coats here doing this, building up and getting it closer and closer to what I think felt like a natural sweeping transition from the faceplate to the new frame.
So it's the following day, and I'm looking at just the options to finish this. But before I do, I need to tell you about something bad that happened. Yesterday, whilst trimming my mohawk in the garden, my next door neighbour's cat darted between my feet and shocked me. And I was here and I went, and I cut a massive hole through the middle of my mohawk. And so the only other way to rectify it was to do this. And now I've got to grow all my hair again. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap this. So I'm not too worried about like the perfection in this thing. So we've got like little dinks and holes here and there, like there's this stuff in the putty that you would clear out if you were going to paint, but because we're going to wrap it in a material, those things don't matter too much. If we do a size fit test with the stereo, the fit around the consistency around the outside edge is really good. The question is now though, what material do we wrap this in? And I had 4, but really it's only 3 options. First one is Alcantara, which I've used throughout the rest of the dashboard. It would look really good, and you get nice. One of the things I look at is how it like creases around edges when you get inside folds. So here you don't really get any like creasing issues. So that would be really nice when that was all laid down. The one problem with using Alcantara is I have used a lot of it across the dashboard, and I've got a feeling it might be a bit too much Alcantara. Second option is leather. I have various forms of leather, but this is actually a synthetic PU leather, so it's like fake, but it's got a slight stretch in it, which would mean maybe I can get it down into these recesses. My one concern with it, it stretches nicely over like these edges, but when you get an inside corner like that, you can get this bunching. You need to have it stretched and laid really perfectly, otherwise you get all these bunch marks around the outside edge here, and I really don't like the way that that looks. It might be possible to avoid with the right stretching, but could be tricky. The third option, probably the most controversial one, is a material that I am currently using on the lower parts of my doors and on the brace, which is this kind of textured self-adhesive material, which I did as part of a test of can we make Temu material look good. And this is Temu material. And I actually think it could be all right. As for this bottom bit, I want to make a panel that can basically swap into here. And for now, it's going to have the switches for my underglow in, which currently are inside the cubby. So these will come out. as will the USB extension, and go into this panel. So I think I'm going to try using this one first, because if it looks garbage, because it's self-adhesive rather than being glued, it will be a lot easier to remove. So I'm going to try this, put the stereo in, put it in the car, see how it looks, and then if it looks like garbage, I think the next best choice will be the Alcantara. So yeah, I'm going to go wash it up, and then we're going to sit here on the floor and try and wrap this thing.
The thing you're immediately going to notice is there's a seam down the middle of the material. It only comes in 50 centimeter sections, and I needed about 55. So I sewed a couple of pieces together and put the seam in a place that's going to be minimal, that you won't really see. So that's right in the middle. And then we stuck down the top and stretched it down into the bottom corners, but making sure that I keep the pattern kind of equal down the middle so it's symmetrical. Then it's a case, much like when you're doing a vinyl wrap, of just stretching the material out, because this is a self-adhesive backed material, so it's pretty easy to use and it's really thin. Once we've got the core stuck down, we can trim the edges, twist over the side and stick it down on the underside all the way up the edges and along the top, making sure it all stays nice and neat and tight. With the actual section for the radio, simple enough, just cut it out, snipped into the corners, and then folded down all the outside edges. Again, was really simple. The only bit that was a little bit of a challenge to figure out was the 3 gauge holes at the top. Initially, I thought you might be able to stretch the material down to cover the lower part, but it's just not got any stretch in it. So I decided to do it another way and cut the holes out, folded it down around the top edge, much like doing around the outside edges of the fascia. And then on the lower part, there's a small hole, well, a small gap that you can tuck the material into with a sharp knife like this. I ended up with a few little wispy bits of material, so simply did the old trick of taking a lighter to them and just burning them away. So that's all gone, and the whole result is nice and clean and pretty simple to do.
I ended up using the same material, and then the tuck that I managed to do in here, I've tucked it from both directions so it's nice and neat. And yeah, then just hit it with a lighter, put these back in, and then I had to break these seals. So glued them down and then used some super tape stuff, which should hold all that in position. So just got to put the rings back in, the gauges back in, attach the stereo itself, and then this bit, yeah, this bit I just still need to figure out and print, but it's pretty simple. It's just basically taking this, which is the piece that usually went in there for the stereo, measure that at all its different points, and then just print it with the holes cut out for the switches that I want to put in. And then I can just probably wrap that in just a gloss black vinyl, install, or maybe a carbon, install it in here, and yeah, good to go. So hopefully have this back in by tomorrow.
With the new insert all 3D printed, you get to do one of the most fun things, which is remove the supports. It always makes nice, satisfying noises. But yeah, so we want to just make sure that this all fits. So we'll do a little test and make sure it's all good. And again, somehow got it bang on first time, which is always satisfying. Then we've got these little feet. I did these separately so they were an easier print. And we'll just super glue them in place because ABS is completely non-porous. So super glue is the best option. Then give it a quick sand with some 240 grit just to smoothen it out in order to wrap it. And we're going to wrap it in this 6D carbon. It's pretty close to my genuine carbon that I've got in the car already, so it'll do for the short term. And we're just going to very simply wrap this. It's not a difficult shape at all, even with those 2 slight elevations on both sides. The one thing that we have to be careful of is the tight lip along the outside edge. You're going to want to make sure that you heat well into the corners in order to get those pressed out, and then run something sharp like this wrapping tool into those corners to make sure that we get them all pressed out nicely. When we're done there, all the way around, we can just cut it out using a knife. Again, nice and simple. Remove the excess, and then do a quick post-heat and just make sure that everything is stuck down exactly as we want. Obviously, there's currently vinyl in some of the holes where we're going to put the things that are in this fascia plate. So we just need to cut them out. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, and they don't have to be folded in because stuff is going to cover those edges. The first thing we put in is the USB. So I just want to make sure this has the little blue bit on the bottom because I'm anal like that. And then pull out the locks just to make sure it's all held. Then we're going to put in these 3 switches. So these 3 switches are used for my underglow. And basically, one of them has the big red cover on it. This one is the one that powers both of the 2 other underglow switches. It basically is a master switch that can quickly just turn off power to both the interior and the exterior glow. Then the other 2 with the on-off, one powers the underglow, one powers the interior light. What I just want to do is make sure that they're all perfectly tight without being too tight that they crush, and also having the nuts all aligned in the same way. When they're all in, we can just wire up the back. So I'm putting a wire from the red one to the other 2. This would be the one that feeds the power over. Then we have an input line that goes into the red one at the bottom, which goes off to my ACC power. Then the other 2 have their various outputs, so the exterior light output and the interior light output. Once it's all wired together, we can just pop it in place. Fortunately, all of the holes and everything lined up perfectly for the clips, so we can just screw all that back together. And with this all done, basically, that is our entire fascia with all the new inputs done and ready to go. Doesn't she look lovely?
So with this basically done, I guess we go put it back in the car. I'm still waiting on the SIM card to arrive in order to put that in there, but it should be here today. And I'm just seeing the postman walk down the other side of the road, so hopefully we'll be here soon. I should definitely take the jump pack out with me because I've been doing a lot of stuff on the car over the last couple of weeks, but I haven't been driving it. So I'm pretty sure the battery is going to be pretty dead. Yeah, but let's go put this back in. Yeah, the car wouldn't even unlock. So it is definitely like super mega dead. One of the biggest complaints people have about these Chinese head units is that they don't amplify particularly well, but I don't use the amplification inside. I've got a Kenwood head unit here, and so that's what we'll be doing, all my amplification. So I need to basically connect the head unit up to the RCA outputs that are in the back of here. This is the thing for the steering wheel controls. I should probably just put a terminal on here, like a bullet connector, and then put one on the other side on the back of here because it doesn't have them. These are the connectors for my underglows. Let's just move out of the way. So these will have to just come down here. But I guess I should make sure it all fits before anything else. Fingers crossed. We're going to be all good. It's looking good. Before I clamp it down, let's jump start this car and make sure everything works okay. I'm just going to plug this back in because otherwise the AC is just going to go mad. Right, moment of truth. Oh, geez, everything. Well, powering on. No, I need to leave the charger on for a minute. Oh, not quite. Not giving it enough power yet. As we can hear by the noise, we're back. Oh, I've killed it. How's that happened? I think I need to go driving because this clearly needs to get some like battery juice in it. I'm gonna go do that and we'll worry about looking at this when we get back. I've been out for a 30-minute drive. Let's not turn the whole thing off. Let's just, there we go. What do I think? Well, it works great. The issue that I was trying to fix was when I was looking this way, I needed to glance too far down to see everything. But now it's just like, it's there. So if I want maps, I can just bring up maps. So it's not loading the maps at the moment because my SIM card hasn't arrived yet. So this will have its own dedicated SIM card in it. But yeah, the position is great. It's quick. It seems to be smooth. There's I've only got one song on here at the moment on Spotify that is cached. So I got the steering wheel controls all working fine. So this is volume. Yeah, so everything seems okay. I need to tune in the EQ and everything, but other than that, this is feeling good. Let me just zoom out and you can take a proper look at it. So there we go. Oh, this. So that's power. And then that one we can't see because it's under the car. That one's down there. You can see if I turn it on and off, you can see the amber glow that comes on underneath my feet. And the other one is on currently, which should be in that under here is blue currently. I think it was set to blue. Oh well, there you go. And then if I turn this off, it all goes off because this is a catch-all that powers off both of those. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I like how this material looks. It's not, you don't see it and go, oh, that's, super gauche. Obviously, it's going to split the court of public opinion, as I've said a couple of times, but I've used it here and it is used on the lower parts of the door there and actually on the strut bar middle behind me. So it's a little bit more cohesive and it flows through. And I don't think this is real carbon, this is fake carbon. I don't think it looks too out of place. So that's good too. The things I wanted to achieve with this was that it was easy to look at. So if I'm looking out the front of the car, it's just there now. So when I've got full screen maps up, it's dead easy to just glance rather than going all the way down there. Also, there's no reflections on the screen. The camera is basically where my eyes are. If you lean forwards, you can see the reflection. But when I'm sat in my normal position in the seat, you don't get any reflections off the windscreen, which is, pretty key. So all in all, I think this is a success. Like I said, there's some plans in time to make some alterations. So this lower console isn't going to just be those switches forever. There is something going to happen with that as part of an electronics project, which is going to happen over on my main channel, Garage Tinkering. But overall, yeah, I think this has turned out all right. It looks cohesive and OEM. It looks like it's where it should be. Doesn't feel like over the top. This smoothing that I did to transition from the original front fascia plates to this new alignment seems to have worked really well. I'm dead happy with this. If you're interested in putting this exact stereo in, this 9-inch EK-IY T7, I will put a link to this head unit in the description, as well as a link to download these two STL files if you wanted to 3D print the bracket and the blanking plate. And the blanking plate, I've put one in there with no holes in it, so you can decide how you want to put holes in it. If you've never done that before, use Mesh Mixer. It's dead easy. And then obviously you can follow through the same steps that I did of how to put it together. It is a fair bit of work, but I think it's worth it. It's completely changed how the inside of this car feels, and that's real cool. Anyway, hope you found that useful, and if you've got any questions or want to know anything more about this full installation, just let me know and I'll do what I can to answer. Otherwise, whatever you do with the rest of your day, folks, have a wicked one, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy, peeps. Bye-bye.